Welcome, everyone, to the PFF Fantasy Podcast, IDP edition. I'm Jon Macri, and we're getting closer and closer to the fantasy playoffs. I'm sure, there are plenty of people who are already dominating your leagues and cruising to a playoff spot. But at the same time, there are just as many of you who are in must-win mode for these next 4 weeks. And that's why we're here to help give you all the IDP information you need by covering as many players as we can, so no stone is left unturned, and eventually lead you to the fantasy football promised land. So let's get it. All right. Like I said at the top, we're in a crucial part of the season here where wins are more important than they've been all season for some fantasy managers. So I'll be doing the usual game by game breakdown, discussing all the key IDP information to get you ready for the week ahead. It's just me this week. It was supposed to be the reschedule with Joey the Tooth and I, but unfortunately Joey couldn't make it right before we had to record. So that's okay. The universe, clearly wants to keep us apart, but we'll find a way, Joey and I, one of these days. So for this week, it's just me. We'll rock through it here. These episodes, they're a little bit longer, but when it's just me, should be a little tighter. We'll see how things go. But yeah, I'll include the timestamps as usual, anyways, for each game in the episode description. That way, again, if you don't want to hear me talk nonstop, I don't blame you. So you can jump around and find the games that you're looking for. Listen to 1.5 times speed, however it works for you. But we're going to make sure that I cover as much as we can here, so that nobody's lineups are left behind. And if there's anything that maybe I don't cover in this episode, you can check it out maybe in the IDP Fantasy Report or IDP Rankings episode or Rankings article. I'll link that in the episode description, which you could get access to with a PFF Plus subscription. And then feel free to ask questions in the comment section. Reach out to me on Twitter. I'll be happy to answer those as well, whatever works best for you. So, with all that being said, let's get right into it with Thursday Night Football. It is the Washington Commanders and the Philadelphia Eagles in an NFC East battle. So we'll start with Jeremy Chinn of the Washington Commanders, the safety. I know that he's been, producing well lately. So a lot of people have had questions about him. Can we trust him? Can we plug him into our lineup? Is he a must start? This and that. And honestly, yeah, he's a pretty solid start here. I mean, he's getting a pretty consistent box role again. He's played 41% of snaps in the box on the year. There's been a few games here and there where he wasn't playing in the box, but now it's a couple games where it's been the large majority of his snaps, and that's really helped his tackle numbers. Pretty strong tackler for the year, 10.4% tackle rate. That's great. It's not the most amazing matchup here. That's the only thing that probably keeps him out of like that top 12 safety range with that usage, is the Eagles are giving up the 30th most tackles per game to the safety position, but still like Jeremy Chinn as like a high-end safety too this week. I think I got him like safety 14, something like that. So he's not far. Definitely can be in your starting lineup. It is a good matchup for the Washington linebackers. I got Bobby Wagner pretty high this week, like LB2. He's been excellent all season. Frankie Louvu, I don't know. He's hard to trust. We've talked about him, right? He's just so big play dependent, which, isn't really what we want from our linebacker position in IDP, in week to week leagues. He plays a lot on the defensive line and he rushes the passer a lot. He does those at both a top 3 mark for the position. That's led to just an 8.6% tackle rate, it's brutal, right? Like we just talked about Jeremy Chinn, 10.4%, I think I said. That's as a safety. Those numbers aren't supposed to be higher than your full-time linebacker. So Frankie Louvu been really inefficient. Like overall scoring on the year, he's fine. He's like LB 20-ish, but it's propped up by those big games where like he has a lot of shit mixed in there. And that's just going to continue throughout the season, it seems, with him just because of that usage. And he was already kind of an ineffective tackler looking at like his tackles versus expected numbers in the offseason and things like that. So not as in love with Frankie Louvu. He's just outside like the top 36 linebackers for me this week. Sure, he can land a big play, but again, he's going to be a little bit too boom bust for what we want for our linebacker position. So just depends what you're looking for here. The only other part of the Washington Commanders that I wanted to touch on was Dante Fowler, because he's been hot recently, right? Like he's got 8.5 sacks on the season, 4 of them in the last 2 games. But I don't know. It's important not to get caught up in his sack production. Like this is still very much an average pass rusher who isn't playing like at a high enough level to kind of maintain those numbers throughout the rest of the season. I was looking at his numbers, ranks 56th at the position in pass rush grade, 51st in win rate. Like he's been delivering pressure, but he's converting at like a really unstable rate so far. So just be careful kind of chasing those points. He's also averaging like 49% of the snaps on the year. That's not great either. This week facing the Philadelphia Eagles, like we said, they're expected to get back left tackle Jordan Mailata to pair back up with Lane Johnson on the other side. So those are two top 10 pass blocking offensive tackles in the league. So for me, just makes this a week to kind of reset expectations of Fowler compared to this season as a whole. I wouldn't be surprised if we see some regression from him here in the later half of the season. So he's been great so far, but again, we want to be careful about chasing that production. For the Philadelphia Eagles, not a ton here. This is a pretty straightforward defense for the most part. Josh Sweat, I got in the low end edge 2 range. Jaden Daniels is a difficult quarterback to bring to the ground, but not impossible. Jalen Carter, really strong. I got him as a DT7. He's playing a ton. His pass rush metrics are great. I know he doesn't have like the high sack numbers right now, but everything he's doing is, as far as underlying metrics goes, are what we want from our interior defensive linemen. So we roll with him. We trust him. I'd love him for Dynasty right now. So he's doing everything that we hoped he could coming out of college, and it'll start translating to sacks very soon here. Bryce Huff, he's got 2.5 sacks on the year. This isn't a guy that we're trusting. He played like 12 snaps last game and had a sack. So it's just not a relevant IDP asset. So I know he had the sack last week. No reason to get caught up in that or trust him in our lineups. And then the linebackers too, they've been playing really well. Obviously, Zach Bond got him as LB8 and Nakobe Dean as LB21. Both of those guys definitely startable on a weekly basis. They're playing full-time roles. You love to see that. And just a slightly above average matchup for tackles to the linebacker position and to the safety position as well, because Reed Blankenship has been really solid too. So I'll get into the Sunday slate here, but first want to give a shout out to our friends at DraftKings Pick 6. The best part of football season, checking out the post-game stats, which wideouts scored more than 2 touchdowns, which linebackers delivered double-digit tackles. Think you could pick who will do what before kickoff, then play Pick 6 from DraftKings, an official daily fantasy partner of the NFL. Download the DraftKings Pick 6 app, select between 2 and 6 players, and choose if they'll have more or less of a stat. It's that simple. And for all first-time Pick 6 players, check this out. New customers play $5 on your first pick set, get $50 in Pick 6 credits. Download the new DraftKings Pick 6 app now and use code PFF. That's code PFF for new customers to play $5 on your first pick set, get $50 in Pick 6 credits. Only on DraftKings Pick 6. The crown is yours. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. Help is available for problem gambling. Call 888-789-7777 or visit ccpg.org. In Connecticut, must be 18 plus. Age and eligibility varies by jurisdiction. Pick 6 not available everywhere, including New York and Ontario. Void where prohibited. 1 per new customer. Non-withdrawable. Pick 6 credits expire in 6 months. Limited time offer. See terms at pick6.draftkings.com/promos. All right. On to Sunday now. Minnesota Vikings at the Tennessee Titans is the first game up. And want to start with Jonathan Greenard. We highlighted him last week, as well as Andrew Van Ginkel. Van Ginkel got the sack. Greenard did not. He had a really poor game. I'd say uncharacteristically poor is kind of how I put it in the IDP fantasy report this week, but I'm not overly concerned about it. I still have Greenard as edge 7 this week. We've highlighted him a few times now as just being in the midst of a career year in terms of pass rush metrics. He played a season high 96% of Minnesota's defensive snaps, but he delivered a season low 47.6 pass rush grade with no pressures and no pass rush wins. So you play that many snaps, it feels like kind of a statistical impossibility considering, his performance on the year as well, combined with the playing time and the matchup last week. But for now, I'm thinking it's just going to be kind of a 1-week anomaly. I trust Jonathan Greenard and the numbers that he's put up this season. He's going against the Titans offensive line, which has been awful. And more specifically, Will Levis, who, has the pocket awareness and ability to avoid sacks, kind of a negative ability, I would say, for Will Levis. So it's a really great matchup. The same thing with Andrew Van Ginkel. I got both of those guys in the top 10 this week, expecting a nice bounce back for Greenard specifically. Blake Cashman, the linebacker for the Minnesota Vikings, returned to the lineup this past week. He had a 3-game absence due to turf toe. He did miss the one drive, which was seemingly due to injury, but he played his usual 100% snap roll outside of that 9-snap period. He did land a sack for us, so that was nice, as did Ivan Pace. But the Vikings defense as a whole just played 44 defensive snaps. So that plays a part into Greenard's production as well as Cashman's, because that's a really low number, 44 snaps for a defense in a week. So any production on top of that sack was going to be hard to come by for Cashman. He should be in a much better spot this week, going up against the Tennessee Titans, who have yielded the 3rd most tackles per game to the linebacker position this season. Additionally, when you consider Brian Flores and his willingness to blitz, I wouldn't rule out another sack or, for either Cashman or potentially Ivan Pace going against, again, the poor offensive line of the Titans and Will Levis, who again owns the 3rd worst pressure to sack conversion rate in the league. So Ivan Pace, we're not necessarily trusting him in most formats. He could be in deeper leagues because he's not going to play a full-time role, probably not anywhere close to a full-time role, might be below 50% if we're willing to risk it. And Blake Cashman, I feel fine with. Blake Cashman, I'm fine starting. I think I got him as LB7 in a great matchup this week. So like him quite a bit. Let's go to Tennessee next and start with Jack Gibbens, who, the more weeks that go by without Jerome Baker, basically even sniffing the field, the more confidence I think we should have in Jack Gibbons' season continuing here. I like Gibbons. I liked him this offseason quite a bit. I kept targeting him in best ball drafts, and then the team traded for Ernest Jones, and I thought those shares were dead, but it's all okay now because Gibby is back. He's led the team in tackles in 3 straight weeks. I got him as LB19 this week. It's a top 5 matchup for linebacker tackles going against the Minnesota Vikings. So like Jack Gibbons quite a bit. Mike Brown is the safety filling in for the injured Quandre Diggs. Amani Hooker's the other safety for the Titans. The Vikings are dead last in tackles per game to safeties, though, so not a good matchup for those guys like Mike Brown, Amani Hooker. I got Amani Hooker safety 27, but Mike Brown is safety 43 for me this week. So these guys are really only ones that have value where, just being a starting safety is valuable for your league. So deeper formats here. The other things for Tennessee, Jeffrey Simmons, he's been solid once again this season. He draws a pretty favorable matchup here against the Minnesota Vikings interior offensive line, which ranks just 26th in pass blocking grade, having allowed the highest pressure rate and the 3rd most sacks on the season. So Jeffrey Simmons, he might not be an elite pass rusher, but he's still above average in that regard. And he plays a volume heavy role. And I think that should allow him to get home this week against Sam Darnold, who owns the 12th worst pressure to sack conversion rate in the league. So like Jeffrey Simmons, I think I got him DT3. Harold Landry, a solid option as well. Probably on the lower end edge 2 range for me. All right, next up is the Jacksonville Jaguars and the Detroit Lions. So let's start with really quickly just the Jacksonville edges. Josh Hines-Allen, we've talked about him having another really great year as far as pass rush metrics go, facing Taylor Decker this week. So not the most ideal matchup for him as a pass rusher. Less ideal for Trayvon Walker. I got his edge 23. He should see a lot of Penei Sewell this week. So tougher matchup for the pass rushers. But I think probably the most important thing from this matchup is Foye Oluokun. So I got him as LB22 this week, which might seem low considering that he finally got back to that 100% snap roll that we've really been waiting for this season. The only thing is, since he's been back from injury, his role comes with kind of this added wrinkle that isn't really ideal for tackle efficiency. So over the past 3 games, Oluokun has spent 23% of his defensive snaps lined up on the defensive line. And while he isn't rushing the passer in those situations, he's still basically taking a hit to his tackle efficiency because that alignment is not great. It's yielded just a 5.4% tackle rate for linebackers this season, which is a big drop off from the 13.3% yielded when lining up as like just a normal off-ball linebacker, right? So it's good to have Oluokun back playing every snap. His overall LB1 potential, though, just kind of continues to be stunted this season, just considering the usage on the field. It's not the worst thing. He's not playing 100% of snaps there, but it's enough that it might be hurting his potential overall. But again, the nice thing is he's playing 100% of snaps. Devin Lloyd is not playing 100% of snaps. He's coming off the field a fair bit, usually for about a quarter of the total defensive snaps. Still a fine option. He's been really effective as a tackler. I got him as LB36. Again, 77% of snaps around there. It's not ideal for most formats, but for deeper leagues, definitely a solid option. Andre Cisco, just really quickly, he's a safety for the Jacksonville Jaguars. He's been basically full-time all season, but he actually rotated with Antonio Johnson this past week quite a bit, cut into a lot of his overall snaps, basically makes these guys unusable. The entire Jacksonville safety core is no good to us at this point. So we can move on from them, and we'll head to Detroit, where Malcolm Rodriguez might be back this week. So Jack Campbell has played over 90% of snaps in 3 straight games. He played 100% last week, but Malcolm Rodriguez hasn't played in any of those 3 games. So he could be back this week, which is kind of like the last hurdle to clear as far as like fully embracing Campbell's like full-time snap shares. Excuse me. So for now, I really still like Campbell, startable option. I got him as LB33. I'm expecting Rodriguez to play, probably cut into the snaps a little bit, but if we can keep it around that 90% range, then Campbell's still a good option for most formats, but we'll have to see how that kind of shakes out. After that, I mean, Brian Branch, Kirby Joseph, they've been excellent. Brian Branch, safety 1 for me. Doesn't matter the matchup as far as tackles go. There are certain guys that are matchup proof. Brian Branch being one of them. Kirby Joseph's been excellent, but he's safety 20 for me this week because of the matchup. So just low end safety 2, not the end of the world there, but just again, not the best matchup as the Jaguars giving up the 24th most tackles per game to the safety position. All right, Las Vegas Raiders and the Miami Dolphins next. So Robert Spillane, I got him as LB3 this week. He's been excellent all season. Divine Diablo, he's been playing a lot more recently. Even last game, he was over 90% of snaps before garbage time. So he's another solid option. It's a good matchup. Miami giving up the 6th most tackles per game to the linebacker position. I think those guys are both startable. Diablo a little bit deeper leagues just because it's not exactly a full-time role, but Spillane locked and loaded. We're starting him every week based on what he's done this season. The other one that I think we can continue to just start again every single week is Trayvon Merrick, the safety for the Las Vegas Raiders. I got him as safety 2 this week. So these are the splits for Trayvon Merrick that I think are pretty encouraging. Through the first 4 weeks of the season, Trayvon Merrick only spent 22% of his snaps in the box. But over the last 5 games, that number is 50%. So he spent half of his snaps in the box. And then the difference, as far as production goes, in those first 4 games, he had 20 total tackles. That's 5 tackles per game, which honestly, it's not bad. But compared to the last 5 games, he has 45 total tackles, averaging 9 per game. So that's kind of the perfect example of why those box snaps matter so much. For a guy like Trayvon Merrick, who was playing deep, in pretty much every year previously, and he wasn't really all that effective for IDP purposes, but you move him to the box and all of a sudden, he's a tackle machine. So we like the role, we like the player now, and we could continue to start him. Miami giving up the 3rd most tackles per game to the safety position. So love that for Merrick. That's kind of it for Las Vegas. I mean, Max Crosby, we're starting him every week, but that's really it for their IDPs, I would think. The Miami IDPs are interesting. I mean, they're actually not. It's really only their linebackers are probably interesting, at least for this week, to see how things kind of shake out, because that Miami linebacker core is now including Tyrell Dodson. So David Long was benched and then he was released today on Wednesday. So David Long no longer on the team. Anthony Walker, I mean, he might be benched soon as well. He was the one that filled in for David Long during his benching, but they grabbed Tyrell Dodson, who has graded out as one of the better coverage linebackers in the league, at least according to our numbers here at PFF. He ranked third in 2023, 11th so far this year. So, I mean, if things go well, like he could stay on there beyond this season. We'll see if they're treating this move as kind of like a long-term tryout, or maybe they think they can turn their season around and he could plug a hole in that defense, whatever the case may be. But for now, I'm not necessarily starting Tyrell Dodson or Anthony Walker, like unless we get kind of definitive information saying one or the other will be full time. It's going to be kind of hard to trust them until we see how those snaps play out. But I mean, Jordan Brooks, we could start. He's definitely fine here. I got him as LB11 this week, but there are two full-time linebacker roles in this Miami defense. So Tyrell Dodson, we got to assume has the potential to get one of those spots. So I'd imagine that him and Jordan Brooks could be the full-time linebackers there of the future. So by the future, I mean, at least the rest of the season. So we'll see how that goes. But again, not necessarily trusting it this week, but fine to kind of hold Tyrell Dodson and believe in his role kind of growing as the weeks go on. All right, Indianapolis and the New York Jets are next, and let's start with Indianapolis. It's a poor kind of tackle matchup for the Colts linebackers and their safeties. But again, like there are certain players that we trust a little bit more than others as far as being matchup proof. Zaire Franklin, EJ Speed, I think they've earned that trust from us. They've been great this season. So fine starting them still. Same thing with Nick Cross. We've talked about Nick Cross being in poor matchups before, but just like Trayvon Merrick, Nick Cross playing a ton in the box. So that's just going to help with his tackle numbers. And even in poor matchups, he's not playing like a typical safety role. We don't get a lot of box heavy safeties like a Nick Cross, like a Trayvon Merrick. So we take advantage of those usages when they come. And Nick Cross definitely, to me, could still be a locked in starter. Other than that, man, there's not a lot here for Indianapolis. Obviously, Kenny Moore, we're starting him at cornerback. Leatu Latu, not a lot going on there. I mean, there was some talk. I saw some stuff this week. You know, Leatu Latu, we got to be patient with these guys. I know he's a first round pick. He's a 15th overall pick, right? This is not, you know, the first overall pick like a Myles Garrett or, you know, a Trayvon Walker. And I mean, if you want to compare Leatu Latu to Trayvon Walker, who was a first overall pick right now, who everyone is kind of head over heels for because he has 7.5 sacks on the season. But if you look at their underlying metrics, it's a lot closer than you would think. So I was looking at it today. Trayvon Walker. So Trayvon Walker, I don't know why I'm going on this tangent here. Just a little something. Just bear with me here. We got a little bit extra time this week. So Trayvon Walker, 63.7 pass rush grade this season. Remember, this is year 3 for Trayvon Walker. Leatu Latu, 65.7 pass rush grade, year 1. Trayvon Walker, 11% pressure rate. Leatu Latu, 11.7% pressure rate. And then Walker, 13.3% pressure rate. Latu, win rate. God damn it. Latu, 13.3%. 10.9% win rate. Trayvon Walker, 13.3% win rate. My God. What a disaster that was. Basically, the point being that Trayvon Walker and Leatu Latu, their underlying metrics are incredibly close. Latu actually having the better pass rush grade, having the better pressure rate, but Walker's got the better win rate, barely, right? And he's got more sacks, which let's look at if you look at how many snaps these guys have played, Trayvon Walker has played more defensive snaps than any edge in the entire league. He's played 539 defensive snaps. They are putting him out there. They are leaving him out there. He's falling into production a lot of the times just by default of being on the field. Nobody's played more snaps than Trayvon Walker. Leatu Latu, 375 defensive snaps. That is 40th at the position. So context matters when you're comparing these first round picks. Be patient. Leatu Latu will be just fine. New York Jets defense is next here. They will be facing Anthony Richardson this week, which is at least a downgrade for the pass rushers of the New York Jets, because Anthony Richardson is actually, he's been doing a really nice job avoiding sacks. That's been one of the things that's been a strength for him. Joe Flacco, not so much. And then on top of this being a top 5 pass blocking unit in the league for the Colts. So Quinnen Williams, I got his DT9. It's a thin position, right? So there's not many guys that we're going to trust over him, even in a tougher matchup here. Will McDonald, he's been solid. We talked about maybe regression for him in the back half of the season. I'd imagine that hits a little bit this week, but fine treating him as a low end edge 2. And then Hassan Reddick is probably one that I'm avoiding in most leagues if I can. Like I got him as edge 34. So deeper leagues, he might get in the field for you because he's actually good. But he's not, his snaps haven't quite got there yet. And again, it's a tougher matchup. Other than that, Jamie and Sherwood, we continue to like him quite a bit. Like even if CJ Mosley is back, like I think, we said it last week, they could very well just keep him in that base linebacker role like they did when he came back from injury last time, CJ Mosley. So no real concerns for Jamie and Sherwood this week. I got him as LB 18. Quincy Williams, LB 31. The Colts giving up the 31st most tackles per game to the linebacker position. So it's not ideal, but I like Sherwood. I like what he's done. I prefer him over Quincy Williams, at least for redraft right now. But yeah, Dynasty is another conversation we'll have in the offseason. So continue to like Jamie and Sherwood quite a bit. Okay, Green Bay and Chicago is next. And I'll start with Green Bay. Their linebackers are interesting. Quay Walker, he's fine. He's a full-time linebacker. I got him as LB 25. But they did show us a little something different last time they played. They were on a bye week last week, but the week before that, Eric Wilson actually played a pretty significant role, but he actually kind of played that Foye Oluokun role that we were just talking about with Quay Walker back in the lineup, where the only thing it wasn't 100% of snaps, but he played 74% of snaps last week. Last game, Eric Wilson, 33% of those snaps on the defensive line, 29% in the slot, the rest at off ball. But that was the second most linebacker snaps on the team last game. So we don't mind Eric Wilson for deeper leagues. They still got Edgerrin Cooper out there for 67% of snaps, Isaiah McDuffie for 33% of snaps. So they played 3 linebackers for like nearly 3/4 of that game, maybe a little bit more, which you could argue the value of NFL wise, but for IDP, it potentially gives us at least some deeper league options. So Eric Wilson is one of those deeper league options. I got as LB 48, Edgerrin Cooper is LB 53. As far as the safeties go, we'll see if Evan Williams is back this week. He missed last game. He's had the bye week to recover. If he's not back, Javon Bullard would likely fill in again. If he is back, Javon Bullard would likely go back to that kind of nickel corner role. I have Evan Williams. I'm treating him as back right now, tentatively safety 23 for me. Green Bay defensive line. Caleb Williams, he'd be taking some sacks, that's for sure. 4th worst pressure to sack conversion rate in the league. Doesn't necessarily mean I'm in love with the Green Bay pass rushers. Rashawn Gary, edge 26, Devontae Wyatt right now, DT 26. It could be an opportunity for Lucas Van Ness to kind of get off to a nice start post Preston Smith era. I'm not starting him, but just somebody to kind of keep an eye out for is Lucas Van Ness, especially for his potential dynasty stock now that he's got a larger role or expected to have a larger role with Preston Smith traded to Pittsburgh. For Chicago, Montez Sweat, I think he's still questionable. He missed last game. It's definitely a harder matchup for the Chicago pass rushers going against the Green Bay offensive line. Green Bay, their offensive line, they are the best pass blocking unit in the league right now. And Jordan Love has the best pressure to sack conversion rate in the league right now. So Montez Sweat, I think we temper expectations for him. You could have him kind of as a low end edge too. But yeah, I don't love this matchup at all for the Chicago pass rushers. And then the other piece from this game, we're starting TJ Edwards as well. Tremaine Edmonds is fine. Again, these are 100% snap linebackers. I don't need to provide a lot of analysis there. But Jaquan Brisker has already been ruled out. It's Wednesday. He's missed, I think, 5 weeks now with this concussion. Really kind of concerning for Jaquan Brisker. Obviously, we don't know the whole story here, but that's a long time. We talked about it a couple times, in a couple weeks in a row now. Um, so for IDP purposes, Elijah Hicks is going to be the replacement. Elijah Hicks, for whatever reason, he's a cornerback on RSO. I don't know how many other platforms have him as a cornerback. So not many. RSO, they have wonky positional designations. It's kind of crazy. But yeah, Elijah Hicks potential advantage to have there if you could plug him into a cornerback spot, because he'll be playing a full-time safety role, getting a little bit of box work. But Kevin Byard has been pretty solid, so like him too. Okay, Baltimore and Pittsburgh is next up here, and I mean Justin Matip or Nnamdi Madubuike, he had the 3 sacks last week on Thursday Night Football against the Cincinnati Bengals. That'll be his best game of the season. He's still a solid option, obviously, for IDP, especially for DT required leagues. Like I got him as DT 12 this week. Don't expect those numbers again. We talked about the regression of him all off season, having that 11 game sack streak or whatever it was, 9 games. I can't remember. But yeah, he's a solid option. He's a good pass rusher. He's not amazing by any means, but he'll have his opportunities to be productive. The Steelers are giving up the most tackles per game to the defensive line. Russell Wilson has a tendency to take sacks, so Nnamdi Madubuike can be a starter here for us, no problem. Baltimore linebackers, Roquan Smith, LB1, Trenton Simpson, LB29, great matchup. Simpson appears to be in kind of that around 90% snap role, so he seems to be good to go. Don't mind starting him in most formats, I guess. Then the only other piece here is Kyle Hamilton. Suffered an ankle injury on Thursday Night Football, which is really annoying because obviously, again, another one of our top IDPs goes down. Doesn't seem like it's going to be overly serious, but it does seem like he's at the very least kind of doubtful for this week. We'll see. Maybe I'm wrong. Hopefully he turns it around, but I would imagine he misses at least one game. We'll see what happens. Darius Washington does become interesting. They used him over Eddie Jackson last week when Kyle Hamilton was out. So he could get some good usage, but again, we'll see how things shape up as far as injury reports go and Kyle Hamilton potentially coming back. I don't know if he will, but Darius Washington, not a bad replacement option if we can grab him. For the Steelers, no Alex Highsmith this week, so he's another one that rolled his ankle last week, and that looked nasty. He's going to be out 2 to 3 weeks. Preston Smith, we've just mentioned him in Green Bay, off to Pittsburgh now, should get a decent amount of work. I think I did talk about this in the IDP recap episode. Again, this is a Pittsburgh team that they like their workhorse edges, TJ Watt, Alex Highsmith specifically, but we've seen them use their backups in those roles when one of those guys misses time, whether it's Nick Herbig or freaking Jeremiah Moon, right? So Preston Smith is somebody that they acquired because he can handle that workload and because they potentially need that insurance if one of these guys goes down. So Preston Smith, I think, makes the most sense to play that role. Nick Herbig could also be back this week, so I could expect him to get some use, but I don't expect him to necessarily play more than Preston Smith. If he does, it's probably more just the Steelers easing Preston Smith into action, but I don't think he really needs that. So I would expect Preston Smith to be a solid option in maybe kind of high-end edge 3 type of situation for him this week, just to see how he is, because he's not the high-end pass rusher that Highsmith or TJ Watt are. Deshaun Elliott, also very interesting. Deshaun Elliott, I have as safety 17. He's operated as kind of like a top 12 IDP safety this season. Though there is a diminishing role, it seems, at least over the past couple of weeks, which creates at least some concern for me on whether he can maintain that pace going forward. He's played just 75% and 70% of snaps respectively over the last 2 weeks, which is well below what IDP managers should be looking for from the position. So really the only thing I think from, keeping Elliott from falling too far down the rankings this week is that his usage is, similar to like the box heavy guys that we talked about. He's getting a decent amount of work in the box and around the line of scrimmage when he is on the field, which has allowed him to kind of be productive. So it takes him out of consideration for like top 12 this week, but he can be treated, I think, as a top 24 option for now, with the the potential that his snaps do fluctuate either for the better or worse on any given week at this point. So that's happened quite a bit earlier in the year as well. So Deshaun Elliott, in that safety 2 type range, I think exactly I got him a safety 17. So fine with him for the box usage, not so fine for not playing 100% of snaps. Okay, Cleveland Browns and New Orleans Saints are up next. So for the Browns, they are coming off a bye week. It's possible that Jordan Hicks is back. He's been out a while. Again, getting the extra week to kind of heal up, I think gives him a pretty good shot at returning this week. Obviously, we know Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah is on injured reserve. Mohamed Diabate has been operating as the LB1 for the Cleveland Browns, but Hicks, like we've been saying, kind of makes sense to play that LB1 role for this team if he's healthy, right? Just given his experience and veteran leadership in the NFL, we know how much coaches value that kind of stuff. So just keep an eye on that. Jordan Hicks could be useful. Saints giving up the 12th most tackles per game to the linebacker position. But if Jordan Hicks can't go, then I think Diabate obviously sees a boost as well. It's not a great matchup for our safeties, specifically Grant Delpit. The Saints are 31st in tackles per game to the safety position. Grant Delpit is excuse me, another one of those guys that plays a lot in the box. So we like him a little bit more than your typical safety. So I don't mind him still in that kind of safety 2 range just because of the role and the tackle potential that he can provide. Other than that, Myles Garrett, I mean, yeah, he obviously had the 3-sack game prior to the bye week. He's capable of that on any given week, right? So Saints offensive line is the worst pass blocking unit in the league. They've been bailed out by Derek Carr's ability to kind of avoid taking sacks. He's actually one of the best in the league in that regard. So again, we're starting Garrett no matter what, especially against a really bad offensive line, and hopefully he could be the one to help bring Derek Carr's sack numbers up a little bit. For the Saints, I do want to talk about Carl Granderson really quickly. I got him as edge 15 this week, which, it's been a relatively quiet season for him compared to last year. He posted, I think, 8.5 sacks, ultimately finished as the overall edge 8 for IDP. This season, again, thanks to regression in the sack column, he sits as a low end edge 2 in scoring. Not bad, but he has a great matchup to make up some points this week against the Cleveland Browns. The Browns pass blocking unit ranks as a bottom 5 unit in the league right now. And more importantly, Jameis Winston owns the worst pressure to sack conversion rate at 32.1% in the league. He's taken 8 sacks over his last 2 games as a full-time starter. So there's definitely opportunity here for Carl Granderson. Everybody on the Saints defensive line, it felt like, got a sack last week, or at least their edge group, except for Granderson. Hopefully he can make up for it this week against the Cleveland Browns. Pete Werner, linebacker core here, banged up last game. He's been playing quite a bit since coming back from injury, but surprise, surprise, he's hurt again. Not sure if he'll be able to go this week. Willie Gay would be the LB2, probably in around a 75% snap range. Alontae Taylor and Ugo Amadi as well. Actually, we talked about them on the recap show. Amadi, nice, strong tackle performance in week 10, working as the new primary slot corner in place of Alontae Taylor, who has moved exclusively to the outside, it seems. So Amadi kind of as that nickel corner, he's likely going to have a role that's just typical to the position. We've talked about it before, which won't always lend to the 100% of snaps like we saw last week against Atlanta, who happened to be the most 11 personnel heavy team in the league. This week, he is facing the Cleveland Browns, though, so should still get a decent workload. The Browns rank 6th in the league in 11 personnel rate at 77%. It's possible that in certain matchups that Alontae Taylor and Ugo Amadi maybe swap places in the ranks. But for now, Taylor's been productive enough, I think, to keep starting. I got him as CB4 this week. Even if he's lost the pass rush upside out of the slot. And then for Amadi, I got as CB9. So Like both of these guys as cornerback options. Amadi probably the one most widely available, since Taylor's the CB1 on the year right now. But Amadi definitely has some potential here in that role. Okay, moving to the Los Angeles Rams and the New England Patriots next. So I'll start. Well, really, I mean, not a lot to get into here for the defensive line guys, but just want to mention again, Jared Verse, defensive rookie of the year right now, far and away. It's not close. I got him as edge 6 this week. Byron Young, I got his edge 18. Kobe Turner, I got his DT 10. The New England, I mean, their offensive line as a whole is terrible. Their interior offensive line is the worst pass blocking unit in the league. So Kobe Turner in for a nice matchup here. And then obviously Jared Verse and Byron Young, also great starts. So like them quite a bit. The Rams safeties are interesting. So Quentin Lake, basically the only Rams safety worth trusting right now for IDP. The team deployed a pretty consistent rotation in week 10 between Cameron Curl, Cameron Kinchins, and even Jalen McCullough, who, we had that IDP friendly role from what was it? Yeah, week 9, and was exciting. Potentially was going to be like the LB2, it was looking like, and then they switched things up again, right? So just it turns out to be a mirage. Swung for the fences on that one, didn't work out. It happens. Sometimes it does work out, and it's a nice lottery ticket for us, but that's okay. We stay on top of these things. We can move on pretty easily, because they typically don't cost us a lot in season, off the waiver wire and things like that. So the only other thing here with the safeties are, it's possible that Cameron Curl is maybe battling injuries, which is keeping him off the field for that 100% snap role that he's been playing all season. But it's also possible that the team likes what they've gotten from the rookie Kinchins enough that they want to mix him in. I don't know. Like, until we really see otherwise, like, Lake is kind of by far the best IDP option of the bunch here. So I'm starting Quentin Lake. I'm trying to avoid the rest if I can. And then the linebackers too. God, what another mess here. I mean, Omar Spates led the way last week, 74% of snaps. Christian Roseboom played 62% of snaps. It's hard to trust these guys. I got him as LB 44 for Spates, LB 52 for Roseboom. Like, this Rams defense will play with no linebackers on the field. They're the only team that does that, right? So it's going to be hard to trust them, especially after how much they switch things up from week 9 to 10. There's no telling if they'll do it again here from week 10 to 11, right? So it's also possible Troy Reader could be back off IR now. I think it's been 3 weeks that he's been on IR. This will probably actually be the 4th week since he's been on IR. So he was the guy that they were trusting in a full-time role. If he can get back, then hopefully we could start trusting him again for IDP. But it's harder to trust the rest of them. And then on New England, Jelani Tavai, I got his LB 35 this week. He went back to being kind of the lead linebacker in New England this past week, playing 100% of snaps, having a pretty productive game. The only concerns really for Tavai is the team seemingly wanting more of a rotation there, which is a possibility that could happen if the other linebackers are healthy, which they just weren't last week. No Christian Ellis. Sione Taki got banged up. Obviously, Bentley's out. So Tavai, I mean, again, if these guys aren't healthy, he could be a solid start where you need him. It isn't the best matchup against the Rams, who are yielding the 21st most tackles per game to the position. Just makes him more of an LB3 this week, when combined with the potential to come off the field some if there are other linebackers that they want to work into the rotation there. So just something to keep in mind with Tavai. Other than that, the Rams pass blocking unit really isn't much better than what we see in New England. They're actually the 3rd worst unit. So guys like Keon White and Anthony Jennings are playing a ton. Both of these guys are options depending on your league this week. For Jennings specifically, like more volume heavy play, but White at least has the pass rush metrics to kind of go along with the playing time. So typically tend to trust Keon White a little bit more. I got him as edge 16, but Anthony Jennings could be a solid volume play. We saw him fall into 2 sacks last week, so not impossible. I don't know if Kyle Duggar's going to be back this week. It would be great if he was. I did see that he was back at practice. I did not see what the I guess the designation was for his practice, whether it was limited or full. But it was a good, at least a good sign that Kyle Duggar was back on practice on Wednesday. So like him, because yeah, the safety unit was it was a mess last week. Marte Mapu demoted to basically third on the depth chart. He played 25% of snaps. Marte Mapu droppable. We can move on from him. Then guys like Jalen Hawkins played 82%. Del Pettis played 63%. So Kyle Duggar, please save us from this New England safety core. And then the other thing that I saw today too was Christian Barmore could return to practice this week, which would be really interesting. I don't know, how much time it's going to take for him to kind of ramp up and get back into game shape. But that was a really good sign, obviously dealing with the blood clots from this offseason. But one of the better defensive tackles in the NFL and for IDP purposes as well. So if he gets back out there, I mean, DT required leagues where he's available, if you have the roster space, I might stash him. Just keep an eye on the practice reports this week and see if he actually does return to practice. I did see, I think it was Doug Kide, former PFFer here, was reporting on Christian Barmore potentially returning to practice. So that's exciting stuff there. Okay, Atlanta versus Denver is the next one up here. And we'll start with the Atlanta Falcons, who, I mean, they got Troy Anderson back last week, and then he got injured again. So Troy Anderson, he was cutting into Nate Landman's snaps, and I mean, he would do so again if he's active. Otherwise, the name to kind of keep an eye out for as far as Landman's potential to be a 100% snap player, we have to keep an eye out for JD Bertrand as well now. So JD Bertrand was inactive for the last 2 weeks, but if Anderson can't go and Bertrand can, then Bertrand might actually be the one to siphon snaps from Landman as well, right? We saw that in week 8. So if both of those guys, Anderson and Bertrand, can't go, then we can feel comfortable starting Nate Landman as a 100% snap linebacker. Otherwise, it's Caden Ellis or bust for this group. Yeah, not a lot for Atlanta. Grady Jarrett, he's not overly exciting anymore. He isn't killing it in the sack column, but he's out there every week. He's racking up points for IDP. I think he's got 10.2 points per game, 7% tackle rate for that position. He's been solid. I got him as DT 13 this week. I don't mind Grady Jarrett if you need somebody as a DT 2 streamer. The Atlanta safeties, what do we got? Jesse Bates, safety 5, Justin Simmons, safety 22. Denver giving up the 4th most tackles per game to the safety position. So not a bad matchup for those guys either. Going to Denver next, the Denver safeties, they are interesting as well. Brandon Jones, he's been solid this season. I got him as safety 6. Falcons giving up the 5th most tackles per game to the safety position. So nice safety matchup on both sides. PJ Locke actually got more work in the box last game than Brandon Jones versus Kansas City, but Jones has just been really effective no matter where he lines up. So really like Brandon Jones a little bit more. We'll see if that box roll holds for PJ Locke and if that efficiency starts to turn in his favor. But right now, PJ Locke, he's a fine starting option. I got him as safety 19, but still tend to like Brandon Jones a little bit more. Zach Allen, DT2 for me, always starting him this season. He's played 602 defensive snaps. We talk about volume heavy plays. He's played 100 more snaps than anyone else at the defensive tackle position. So he's actually good too, which is, really helps obviously. 72.1 pass rush grade, 5 sacks. He's only a sack away from setting a new career high. So Zach Allen, continue to like him as a locked in DT option. The linebackers, Justin Strnad versus Quan Alexander, continues to be one to just kind of keep an eye on. Alexander had overtaken Strnad in snaps the previous week, but last week Alexander was inactive because he had reached the amount of practice squad call-ups before the team would actually have to sign him to the 53-man roster. So we'll have to keep an eye if Alexander does get signed to the team, because he's really the only threat to Strnad's snaps. But yeah, it's a deeper league option anyway. Strnad, he's a fine option for deeper league. deeper leagues if there's no Quan Alexander in the mix. And then Cody Barton, I got his LB 28. It's a poor matchup either way. So Falcons giving up the 29th most tackles per game to the linebacker position. Jaquan McMillian. I did want to touch on him, cornerback for the Denver Broncos. He becomes an interesting streaming option this week, going up against the 11 personnel heavy Falcons. His nickel corner role basically puts him into a kind of a prime position to stay on the field, be productive. Falcons are yielding the most tackles per game to the cornerback position, which only kind of increases the upside for McMillian here as a streaming option this week. And he's the second most targeted defensive back on the team and the 14th most targeted cornerback in the league, despite averaging just 74% of the team's defensive snaps, which is a number that I think we should expect him to be higher on this week. So don't mind Jaquan McMillian as a cornerback streamer. Okay, Seattle and San Francisco is up next. Starting with Seattle. So obviously, they released Tyrell Dodson this week. He signs with Miami. So there's a hole there, obviously. Ernest Jones is we're starting him. He's a great start every week. He's playing 100% of snaps. So the other role is Tyrese Knight. He filled in previously for Jerome Baker when Jerome Baker was out, but he did not play a full-time role in that small 2-game stretch, right? He played 57% of snaps the first week and 74% of snaps the second week that Jerome Baker was out. So could be more of the same, as they take him off the field on kind of those obvious passing down situations. So Tyrese Knight, definitely a fine waiver option for deeper leagues. If you have 100% snap players, you're starting them over him. But he's a fine option. We'll see how the usage shakes out this week. I'm sure I'll include them in the IDP recap episode as well. Julian Love, 49ers are allowing the most tackles per game to the safety position. I got Julian Love as safety 3 this week. Played 35% in the box the last 2 games, which is a pretty strong number for him because he played only 16% in the box through the first 7 weeks of the season. So really doubled his usage in the box here recently. So like that for Julian Love. Continues to be a locked in starter for the safety position. San Francisco linebackers. This going against the Seattle Seahawks. So the Seahawks are giving up, where are they? They are, I guess I could switch over let's talk about San Francisco here. There they are. San Francisco Seahawks are giving up the 32nd most tackles per game to linebacker position. So last in the league. Fred Warner, we're not benching him. I just want to make that clear. Regardless of matchup, he's just, again, another one of those matchup-proof players or one that we don't have better options. That he's been so good. He's been so effective. We just continue to roll with Fred Warner. Devondre Campbell, probably somebody, that we can afford to bench at least if you're playing another 100% snap linebacker, just because of the matchup. But for Warner, the track record is just too good to pass on. And then, Nick Bosa going against Geno Smith and the Seahawks offensive line here. Seahawks offensive line has been poor. Geno Smith been decent at avoiding sacks, but we're continuing to roll with Nick Bosa. Diamador Lenore, I got a CB3 this week in a really nice spot here going against the Seattle Seahawks. We're giving up the second most tackles per game to the cornerback position, and the Seahawks play the third highest rate of 11 personnel as well. So Lenore is going to play in the slot quite a bit, and he'll get some prime opportunities for tackle production this week. Okay, Kansas City and Buffalo is next. So I'll start with let's start with Chris Jones. So Chris Jones, no sacks since week 4. Obviously, very frustrating for IDP managers, I'm sure. The good thing with Chris Jones is he's playing a ton, over 85% of snaps for the most part in recent weeks. And he's still an elite pass rusher. He owns a 90.8 pass rush grade on the year. That ranks first at the defensive interior position. It's really just serving as kind of a good highlight as to, the instability of sacks, because even the elite pass rushers aren't going to be able to get sacks every single week, right? So obviously on a bit of a sackless streak here for Chris Jones. Josh Allen and the Bills offensive line, they are a tough matchup, right? But again, we're looking at Chris Jones, we're looking at some of the other options we might have at defensive tackle, and it might be hard to pass on just the overall upside. We've talked about this before, where defensive line is a position where if we're treating it right and we're treating our other positions correctly, where we're getting a better floor from those and a safer floor from linebacker and safety, for example, we could swing for upside with defensive end or defensive tackle. And Chris Jones is definitely somebody that is very boom bust, but the boom for his position is much higher than the average defensive tackle, I would say. So the other thing is his floor is also pretty bad, just because he doesn't put up a lot of tackles, even though he's playing a ton of snaps. So that's just something to keep in mind with Chris Jones. He's very boom bust, but we play him for the boom. And I know I sound like the Costco guys or whatever talking about boom or doom here. That's kind of what Chris Jones is. And if we bench him and he goes off for 2.5 sacks, that's just kind of the risk that we have to live with and understand with this type of player. So I got him as DT8. I'm fine starting him, but again, just keeping in mind that there's a lower floor there. Nick Bolton, I got his LB26. Not a lot else with the Chiefs for me. So let's talk about the Buffalo Bills. They're linebackers, and the Matt Milano practice window is now officially open. He's not playing this week against the Kansas City Chiefs, but he could be out there soon. So Dorian Williams, aka Princeton, with his 18.8% tackle rate. I got his LB20 this week. I got Terrell Bernard as LB6. This is a great matchup for linebacker tackles as well, by the way. Kansas City giving up the second most tackles per game to the position. But I imagine that when Matt Milano is back, they'll want to get him back to being a full-time starter, right? So that's going to push Dorian Williams into an LB3 role, which really just the way that Buffalo deploys their defense, that means there really is no role on a weekly basis for him. So something to keep in mind there. Terrell Bernard should still hold a full-time role as well, but we'll see, because that LB2 role hasn't been full-time recently, at least since Tremaine Edmonds left. It I don't know if it was more, just the Dorian Williams slash Tyrell Dodson thing from last year, or if this is the new scheme, right? Well, we'll have to kind of see how that shakes out, but not as concerned, not nearly as concerned for Terrell Bernard as I am for Dorian Williams right now. So with Matt Milano coming back, I would be looking to be aware if you're a Dorian Williams manager. Looking at the Buffalo defensive backs, I got Teron Johnson, CB1 this week. Great matchup for him. He's been excellent. DeMar Hamlin, we can start. Taylor Rapp, fine. But like safety, he's more in that safety 3 range. Gregory Rousseau, too. He's just been excellent. I got his edge 14 this week, but 87.9 pass rush grade on the year now. That's the 7th best mark at the position. Just faces a tougher matchup against Patrick Mahomes and the Chiefs this week. Okay, Sunday Night Football, Cincinnati Bengals at the Los Angeles Chargers. So we'll start with the Cincinnati Bengals and Trey Hendrickson. Obviously, the 4-sack game in Week 9, none in Week 10 versus Baltimore. No surprise there. That's just a tough matchup. We talked about it then. But it's a fairly difficult matchup this week, but it should be a fun one for Trey Hendrickson going against Rashawn Slater, one of the best offensive tackles in the league. Trey Hendrickson owns a 90.5 pass rush grade on the season. That's the 5th best mark. Rashawn Slater owns the 3rd best pass blocking grade with an 87.6. So these guys are top 5 at their position. It should be a really fun matchup. We'll see how it shakes out, but fine starting Trey Hendrickson. Just again, for the upside, he could get some wins here. I don't remember exactly where I have him, but he's still in that top 12 for me. Edge 8 right now. So fine starting Trey Hendrickson. Other than that, Logan Wilson, Jermaine Pratt, obviously we're still starting them. The Cincinnati safeties, Jordan Battle and Von Bell, continue to kind of split their time pretty evenly over the last 2 games. Have to imagine that one of these days that Battle will clearly overtake Bell at some point soon. But until that happens, neither is going to be startable for IDP purposes one way or the other. So we just kind of wait to see how things shake out with Battle versus Bell, but hopeful for Jordan Battle. On the Chargers side, Derwin James is been disappointing, I would say. Chargers are playing more like three safety looks recently with Elijah Molden and Alohi Gilman playing like their typical safety roles, which does allow Derwin James to kind of roam around the field a little bit more. But the only problem is like Derwin James, he hasn't hit double digit tackles all season. Like he's been fine, but this has typically been one of the most effective tacklers at the position these past 3 seasons, and that just hasn't been the case this year, right? He's better than average, but not like special like he's been, which kills me. I'm talking about him in this way. I got the Derwin James jersey behind me. I love Derwin, still one of my favorite players. But for IDP purposes, we got to be real here. It can't be biased. And yeah, he's just been fine. So for this week, I got him as safety 10 because I don't hate the matchup. And maybe saying it out loud will wake him up, but I'll probably be moving him down a little bit by bit as if it doesn't pick up here. So hoping that this is kind of the me putting it over into the universe that Derwin has to have a big game, and we'll see how that goes this week. But don't mind the matchup this week, but just something to be aware of. I'll probably start moving Derwin down the ranks a fair bit. Diane Henley, though, somebody that's been moving up the rankings. He's been excellent. LB10, I have him as at this week, playing in the most zone heavy defense in the league. He's made great use of that. 16.6% tackle rate is excellent. He's earned a top 12 ranking. We have no problems keeping Diane Henley as a locked in starter. As far as the Chargers defensive line gets a little bit tricky. Joey Bosa did play last week. He actually made it through the game amazingly, but only played 38% of snaps. So take that as you will. Khalil Mack did not make it through the game last week. He played 4 snaps before he had to leave. I don't know if the Joey Bosa fragility is contagious or what, but no, Khalil Mack's been excellent. He hasn't dealt with these problems, but he did not practice at all last week going into the game and didn't make it through 4 snaps here this past week. He did not practice today either on Wednesday. So not looking good for Khalil Mack's potential to get on the field this week. So Tuli Tuipulotu has been great and I think could be a starting option this week in kind of that edge 2 range if it gets confirmed that Khalil Mack is out. So prefer him over Joey Bosa. Definitely prefer him over Dud Dupree. We just never know when to start Dud Dupree. Again, average pass rusher that is going to be incredibly volatile. We'll have to see how things go. But imagine too, like if Joey Bosa continues to make it through games healthy-ish, that he'll see his snap share increase as well. But I think the team is very aware that they don't want to overwork this guy because again, he might crack. Okay, final game of the week. We are going to the Dallas Cowboys and the Houston Texans. Amazing. The Dallas Cowboys are on another primetime game. Oh, joy. I can't wait to watch them. So let's start with the Houston Texans. So Will Anderson, he did miss last week's game with the ankle injury. We'll see if he can go. It's hard, right? So it's not the worst matchup, obviously, for pass rushers. It's actually one of the better ones. Terrence Steele hasn't been good. He's allowed a sack in 7 of 9 games this season. So that's one of their offensive tackles. But maybe they have something in Asim Richards, who looked decent last week, though he did still allow a sack. But he actually graded out pretty well. He was playing left tackle for them. But I mean, if Will Anderson is healthy, along with Danielle Hunter going up against Cooper Rush, I mean, not sure how we don't start these guys, right? Like Rush he was actually good at avoiding sacks last week. Maybe that's the only thing, but still not trusting that to last. So yeah, Danielle Hunter, Will Anderson, continuing to start them. The Houston linebackers, great to see Azeez Al-Shaair back. There were some shenanigans in the first half where he was coming off a little bit on some obvious passing downs, but then he was back to 100% of snaps in the second half, and those shenanigans were gone. So imagine that's just going to stick here, back to a 100% snap player. Henry To'o also played full-time last week, so like both of these guys, like Azeez Al-Shaair, a fair bit more. I got him as LB12 and To'o LB34. The Houston safeties has kind of turned into a wild rotation as well between Eric Murray, Jimmy Ward, Kalen Bullock. If you include Jalen Petrie, he's the nickel. So he's not even locked into a 100% of snaps either. So right now it's kind of a group to ignore. For IDP purposes, I think Jalen Petrie is fine, especially if he's designated as a cornerback in your league. But the other safeties, Murray, Ward, Bullock, not really worth kind of trusting there until we see one of those guys lock in a 100% snap roll. All right, the Dallas Cowboys. Micah Parsons was back, so that was good. He came back with a 2-sack game. Again, a great example of why we don't bench our elites like him, right? We talked about him as a kind of a top 5 play last week, working against, I think it was, yeah, that was the week Kirkland Brand, Lane Johnson, Fred Johnson there. And he got 2 sacks on him against Fred. So yeah, Jordan Mailata is back this week for the Eagles, but Micah Parsons, we continue to start him regardless. Just again, one of the elite pass rushers in the league. DeMarvion Overshone, linebacker for the Cowboys, has bursitis in the knee. I don't know what that is. I didn't bother to look into it. I'm just monitoring the practice reports to see if he plays or not. But the only thing is, we're gonna have to look into it a little bit more. That I'm gonna update the rankings tomorrow, because this is a Monday Night Football game. So it seems like he might miss time. I'm not sure. It definitely becomes trickier since it's Monday Night Football. Ideally, we will get some sort of confirmation prior to Sunday so we can kind of, organize our options a little bit better. But I'd say if that clarity for Overshone doesn't come before Sunday, I'm not really trying to risk it. Like, unless you have a Monday Night Football pivot option like Henry To'o or maybe Damone Clark, somebody like that, then maybe you can hold Overshone to stardom. But again, it's not like the most amazing matchup for linebacker tackles. Houston ranks 23rd in tackles per game to linebackers. So I don't think we need to hold out hope if we could get a Sunday option in there ahead of him. And ideally, we're looking for a Sunday option that, plays 90% and above is worth a snap. So, and that's only if we don't get clarification on Overshone before Sunday. All right. I think that is going to do it for me this week. Hey, look at that. Just over an hour. So it does tend to go a little bit quicker by myself, but I do apologize that you guys got to listen to just me by myself, not a guest. I always like to highlight kind of some of the other great voices and great work going on in the world of IDP. And hopefully we could get Joey back on another time, but just didn't work this week. Actually, for the second time, but it will work at some point. But yeah, anyways, thank you guys for tuning in. If you haven't already, appreciate you even more if you can subscribe to the channel, leave a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts. It's a great way to support the show, and I can't thank you enough if you'd be so kind, and for those of you that have already done it. As always, hopefully that helps you win your matchups. If you still have questions, feel free to ask in the comment section, reach out via Twitter. I'll do my best to get to them all. You can check out the IDP fantasy report, which is out now, linked in the episode description. That lists all my waiver wire targets, snap shares, utilization nuggets, plenty of my thoughts, for every single team. What else do I usually talk about? I think that's pretty much it. Rankings are in the episode description as well. Yeah, I'll be back on Monday morning with a week 11 recap. So be sure to check that out. But that's it for now. So until next time, peace out.